This is in Umanor itself.
That's when it came out.
This is derogation against the first
That was the time of and Marcy started to cover its that's what
appears.
What is? That's great.
Are you going out for the weekend?
Thank you very much. This is great. It's interesting that you found it. And of course, well, no, that doesn't. There are all these things that look like the same. I see, Langachek was up here. Also.
He talks every single other book. He prefaces with Lanka Shekha. This one.
Yeah. Well, it could be because it's so close.
But then the very next page he says
Lanka.
Lanka.
Great. Sangha himself is actually taken to be a prasangika, even though his main works are in Lungi Chetangi, Samsamba. But his own view is said to be manifest in where? Commentary on the Uttara Tantra, the Sublime Continuum. That is said to manifest a prasangika view.
Yes. Isn't the Uttara Tantra in the Samsam section of the Dhamma?
Is that a question?
Well, yeah, I guess the question is but since the Uttara Tantra is in this,
I need only say, there is no entailment.
okay.
How things are classified in the various classifications doesn't necessitate that. This is the way it's asserted in Gelug's. Good point to bring up. Very interesting to know these things. First?
233.
233.
I just,
God, this book's never been opened. Oh, there's a little bit at the beginning where it was open. It's been open. Yes.
it says Gelugpa consequentialists speak a great deal about nominal difference or conventional difference.
Yes.
I guess I just don't understand what the difference between those two differences.
They're the same.
Okay.
Two ways of saying the same thing. In other words, conventionally existent difference or nominally established difference.
Okay, so there's no specific
There's no difference.
Another question on meditational difference.
Yes. Took care of that text.
I have more in there, but it's
Okay, yes.
page 39. There's a chart.
Yes.
And I think maybe I've read the answer to this question many times and not recognized it to be.
Maybe you've read what?
The answer to my question many times and not recognized it to be the answer.
That's
But-
usually the case,
Yeah.
right?
So at the bottom it says the Svatantrikas find columns 1 and 2 the same, and then they find columns 3 and 4 the same, affirming these conventionally for all phenomena but not ultimately. And so
Yes.
column 4 is inherent existence.
Yes.
As I just looked at this, maybe I just don't understand the sentence. How can you affirm inherent existence conventionally? Is that
For them, there's a the way things are is like both with the object and dependent on the subject. So things exist conventionally, they exist inherently, and they're also posited through the force of appearing to a non-defective consciousness. So you said, how do they assert, right, that objects exist inherently?
No, it says they affirm these conventionally for all phenomena. So
Yes,
they affirm inherent existence conventionally
right,
for all phenomena, but not ultimately.
yes,
So there's conventional inherent existence, but not ultimate inherent existence.
correct. That's why they keep insisting on putting the qualification ultimately. I think we had a line from Kamalashila in the last class where he said, ultimately, things do not have Rangshin. So things conventionally do. So what is the uncommon mode of abiding? At the very end last time we were pursuing what would common be? Uncommon would be just on the object side, entirely on the object side. Shared means like the responsibility is shared between the object and the subject. So what does it mean in their system that objects conventionally exist inherently? It means that when you search for the object from within its basis of designation, you can come up with something that is it.
Right.
Now, how is this manifested? I mentioned earlier that Bhava Viveka, I think I mentioned it here. Bhava Viveka says somewhere, if you're proving to me that consciousness is the self, that is a case of proving to me something that's already established for me. Trupsin Druba. Trupsin Druba. Drup means to prove. Trupsin, something that's already established. So that means it's already established for Bhava Viveka that consciousness, which is taken as meaning the mental consciousness, is the self. That means that when you search to find the self, the person, what do you come up with? The mental consciousness. So then the question is, well then what are they refuting? When they say, it's not this, not that, not this, not that. Ultimately, you see, conventionally, it is one of those. You don't say not. Conventionally, things are not just designated and unfindable amongst their basis of designation. So ultimately, when you search, that means when you search to find an object that is established from the side of its own uncommon mode of abiding, and is not just posited through appearing to a non-defective awareness, in that sort of a context, then you can't find it as any of the possibilities. Does that help?
Yeah, that's actually related to all the rest of my questions.
Hmm? Now, whether this is being hung on the Swatantrikas, whether they actually assert this or not, is another matter. We're taking one tiny little line from Bhava Viveka where he says, if you're proving to me that that consciousness is the self, you're proving to me what's already established. Taking that line, putting it together with the fact that Chandrakirti keeps referring to his uncommon interpretation of emptiness and coming up with a different object of negation for these two schools. But pursue all the other ones individually, don't. Just so we make sure we cover all,
Well, I
even
guess
if they're related.
211, maybe you just answered on the other.
But it's good to, spin it out and make sure it's, yes,
I'm sorry, in emptiness.
yes,
This is what you just said, right? Where it says, in the autonomy school, a conventionally existing person is so determined.
Yes.
That's just what you're talking about.
yes.
Okay.
Now, doesn't it make sense that if the person does exist, conventionally, and conventionally doesn't just mean for a stupid consciousness, that you'd be able to come up with something that is the person. And when you start looking at it this way, the Prasangikas look as if they're nihilists.
Yeah, that's what I was just talking with Phil about, that I can understand this view, this Vatantrika's view, and I can understand nihilist's view, but I can't figure out what it is the Prasangikas are saying when they say that.
You've made a lot of progress, okay? If you said you can understand the Prasangikas view, but not the Swatantrikas, then you'd be still swimming about. That means you're rooted.
Okay.
Yeah? I mean, it said, Jayasheva says, it is a difficult point in the Prasangika system.
Yeah, I think you said in the book that it's as if you've been hit in the head by a brick. And I came upon that and I realized I hadn't been hit in the head by a brick, so I figured I wasn't understanding.
What was this?
You say
In here?
212
Yes.
that the consequentialists, if you
Where?
understand that the
Top line?
basis of designation and the phenomena are different and mutually exclusive.
Oh, falling on your head. Yes. What is the factor?
Is that the same?
Consequential system. These things that. What this is saying is, if you seem to get an understanding of how it fits together without it bothering you, but here we're talking about the base of designation, object of designation being different.
Yeah, isn't that the same?
Well, I suppose it is. That's the same point, isn't it? That's nice, thank you. Yes, and you would hit a stone wall.
Well, no,
So?
it says that if you understand it.
No, it means, and seem to get an understanding
Okay.
of how it fits together without it's bothering you, that means you haven't understood it at all. So, the fact that you're thinking, geez, what could the Prasangikas possibly mean, means you're getting ahead. So when Prasangika begins to look like nihilism to you, then it means you're getting your feet on the ground in terms of this way of looking at Madhyamaka. You know, you're just beginning to get somewhere. That doesn't mean you've understood Prasangika. Obviously you have. Because that's the stone wall you're up against.
What's the difference between
An actual snake and a rope snake?
yeah, if the basic
Yes.
designation is mutually exclusive from the imputation of snake, that's a snake.
Hmm.
And again, what makes
Hmm.
That's the same thing
Not
I was
perception.
Hmm.
worrying about before.
Hmm.
to what degree
Yes.
is correct? Especially if it's not truth at all. I want
Well, people say the standard answer given is you have to have a proper basis of designation of a snake in order to have a snake. And a rope isn't a proper basis of designation.
But
My
that's silly because that seems to me that there's some equation between the base of designation and the
Yes, it begins, that's the debate that, I was debating a guy at the School of Dialectics one day, and the teacher that morning or the day before had said something like, oh, do you have to have a proper base of designation? Oh, then that means it exists from the side of the base of designation. Having a proper basis of designation and being established from the side of basis of designation are not the same thing. But he was like, and that's what you're thinking, is, oh, those two mean the same thing. And so when he was debating with me, he just went on and on and on and on. He wanted me finally to say, oh, well, okay, then it exists from the side of his base of designation. Then he was going to attack me for, asserting that things are inherently established. I just said, no. Frustrated him, no end. So having a proper base of designation doesn't mean that something from within the base of designation is the thing itself.
But how,
And then Jaya Shiva says, and this is a difficult point to understand.
and it also says that on 53, emptiness yoga, it's talking about the snake and the rope. And on the paragraph that starts with the consequentialists, they alone say that the basis of designation of the snake is non-snake. But isn't a rope? I guess rope is not non-snake. Is it? Only rope is not a snake, but it's not non-snake. Is that true?
Yes, it's non-snake.
Well, then why can't the rope be the basis of designation of the snake?
Oh, yes. If everything from within the basis of designation is non-snake, when you have an actual snake, then, since when you just have a rope, everything from within the base of designation is a non-snake, then why shouldn't you be able to designate snake to either one? Why wouldn't it be proper? Because you don't have the proper base of designation. What's that? Was there a... Because the one can, bite and the other one can't. The one gives, food for, ingredients for medicine, the other one can't. It's not easy. So you see your qualm is a very educated qualm, is what I'm saying. That's good. So I praise you. Okay?
It doesn't have any.
I gave the answer, you didn't penetrate it. Of the emotional impact of being so wrong for so long, that emotional impact is tremendous, has to be tremendous, earth-shattering. Thus, it seems to me that it's valuable to think, to be ready to prepare, to just think, I'm just wrong. I've just been wrong, and I was wrong in this and wrong and wrong. Almost sounds as if you had weak self-image, that, you'd go out and throw yourself over the cliff then. You get even worse. I don't think it would get worse, even with people with bad self-image, because you're quite almost defiantly, but defiant to yourself, declaring yourself to have been so wrong. And it is, I think, moving out like this. It's like in going back through your past and moving through it and realizing how wrong you were, even though you don't know that well why you were wrong. You've heard something about why you were wrong. And I quite, this sense of moving out I can understand, because it's like in doing the practice of calm abiding, where you're concentrating on one object, the mind, the fracturedness of the mind starts coming together, or in another way, this concentration starts spreading out through the mind. Here the concentration is on one's own wrongness. The permutations in your emotional life and how you've dealt with people and how you've reacted to the good things that have happened to you, but I suppose with more impact, with the awful things that have happened to you, and the sense of, when you mark out someone as, well, now that really is bad. That really is awful. You're wrong. those moments of definition, those moments of, where you're going down the pathway in your life and you take a certain fork. I was living out in the woods in Canada between my junior and senior years, the first half of the summer in Canada and the second half in Oklahoma. And I was out in a lake. Actually, I had to go 3 miles in the lake in a canoe. I don't know if you've ever tried to canoe alone. Canoes are built for 2 people. And I had to go out in this rather large lake, 3 miles, all right? And as I was leaving, I put my stuff in the front of the canoe. I didn't exactly know where I was going. And I did know where I was going because I visited there, in a motorboat or something. And an old guy was walking by and he says, "You'll never make it." So of course, I made me a little determined, I will make it. And, but I also thought, geez, maybe I won't. I kept looking at the waves, There were waves on the lake. And, a canoe with one person, you've got to hit the waves straight on, and you've still got to get to where you're going. Anyway, I made it, but I'm telling this just to say how isolated I was. And because, once you got there, you don't canoe back to town. And I got so that I walked into town, which involved walking up what for me at the beginning was a cliff, which I didn't even want to go out 200 feet into when I first got there. But finally I got to walk into town. And as I'd be walking into town, my mind would drift off, to like these places where the mind had forked, and it would be like, oh, shit, and all of them were wrong. There's some decisively wrong factor in all of them, which is enough to just say wrong. Yes. So, there has to be a nexus of emotions and like vested positions, whether they're vested positions where you're on top or vested positions where you're on bottom, where you're the abused, hurt person. I think we live our lives in such a vested situation. And all those investments are wrong. And it's to open up to cognition of emptiness is to let those investments just can't be there. And you can't just turn your mind away from those investments. You have to de-potentialize them, I say. Yes.
Some of the earlier readings would seem to be talking from examining the selflessness of phenomena initially, and then you one day on the board you drew up progressing from there to an understanding of selflessness of persons, or else I'm not sure it was an understanding, but a progression from there to improper mental application.
Misconceiving a self of phenomena first, mind and body being conceived to inherently exist. Then misconceiving, it's all happening very fast, misconceiving the person that is designated independence on mind and body to be inherently established. Then on the basis of that, exaggerating, was that the improper mental application? Exaggerating the goodness or badness, beauty or ugliness of objects of desire and so forth, right? And then that drawing one into desire and hatred.
Okay.
But this gets to your earlier question in the course, which I presume you're getting to. Do you realize the selfness of the person first or the selfness of other phenomena Which is first?
Person.
Person is first. And what are the arguments against that? What the Dalai Lama was saying is, if you think you've realized the selflessness of the person, then switch to some other object like your tongue or your head or so forth, and see if that selflessness applies, that emptiness. If it doesn't, then you can draw the conclusion that you're working with something coarser than the subtle selflessness. Because you're in the subtle selflessness, it's the same for all phenomena and should apply out. But that's not a reason why you'd have to realize the selflessness of phenomena first. I want reasons why it would seem that you would be realizing the selflessness of phenomena first. My guess is that you can't realize the emptiness of other phenomena before realizing the selflessness of the person, because so much is tied to the person. And you see, this is a realization which is such that it removes all superimpositions of inherent existence, findability, with respect to all phenomena, when you do it with respect to one. It removes the superimpositions with respect to all. Thus, if you've got some naughty one, with respect to which you can't, really get at it, then the chariot, as the neutral example, or so-called neutral, even if it's stunning, really won't get you through to the end. My guess, just a guess, hunch, that's why you have to then turn selflessness to the person and work on this huge knot, which is apropos of what I was talking about. How are you going to work on selflessness of the person except to go through these emotional knots and so forth? And one way to begin to work on those, I think, is to think, I'm wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You see, that's because the person is no simple thing, right? The person is tied to this plethora of emotional events into which we are, I keep using the word vested today. Does that mean something? Into which we are sunk, vested. And so you've got to begin to interfere with them first, which may be selflessness of phenomena. But you see, it's a bit like this, but I think that you've got to be working on the selflessness of the person for it to get down to that subtle level. Even if not finding the chariot or the car will be like, it'll be like as if the whole earth is shattered. Still, it won't shatter quite the way in which it'll shatter when you've really disturbed the notion of yourself.
The self also appears most frequently as the something which is opposite to true existence, or to emptiness.
Yes.
So to have something to work with.
Madhyamaka, our report says, well, it's something that's always with us, and that makes it easier. Well, mind and body are always with us, but it is something. It's always there, and thus, you're saying it makes it worse, or it's more involved because it's always there?
Well, it seemed it could be more impelling in that if you're investigating, it's going to be the thing arising.
Yes, the pivot.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why you start with a chariot. It may even be see, in one way it's too sensitive, so you got to start with something else.
It's always easier to say, well, the book doesn't exist, or it's not real. It's a major impact when you realize.
Yes. So here's a case of, if you want to know if you've realized the summons of the book, switch. I'm turning the Dalai Lama's thing around. Switch and see if this applies to yourself. Oh no, or let somebody throw some water in your face and see if it applies. Don't test me, please.
Does the selflessness of the person appear to sense consciousness?
Oh, does any emptiness appear, for instance, the emptiness of these things to the eye consciousness? There's something that's said on that toward the end of the middling exposition of special insight. And I guess I could say something cute like, would you please read that and report back? I don't know.
I will do that.
The selfness of the person does not appear.
Actually, I misspoke, Jeffrey. I'm really wondering whether whether the inherent existence of the person appears to the eye consciousness. Because so I misspoke. With other phenomena, like a chariot,
Yes.
that appears, and so it's kind of easy to get a handle on the object of negation, because it appears. But with the person, you have to, it's not to the...
That's a great question. Because, for instance, even looking at somebody else, okay, you see body, right? That's what you see. And so there's a person designated based upon body.
Is the mental consciousness considered sense consciousness?
Mental consciousness, no, it's not a sense. So the base of designation is the body, in this case. You can say more theoretically, it's got to be a live body, etc., etc. It has to be a mind there. You can speak theoretically, but in terms of how we're operating, it's probably just the body. As you know, we don't live in a society where there are a lot of dead bodies around.
Yeah, but then this.
Although there are mannequins. But anyway, does his person appear to my eye consciousness? I don't even know how that's answered. I don't even know how it's answered.
But with your own person, which is what
you're referring to, yes. I was trying to simplify it in some sense, simplify the question. Have sense consciousness. The more important with regard to oneself are one's feelings. Pleasure, pain, how this is feeling, that is feeling, right? In terms of base of designation.
Just totally.
Not always, wait a minute. And so the body consciousness is paying attention to all these feelings. It's a person. You know, we talk about Miksheki Sunja, which means like the uncommon object of apprehension of an eye consciousness is color and shape. But it said you still can't say that a building appears to the eye or is apprehended by the eye consciousness. You can't. It doesn't mean you can't say it. You can say that. I don't know.
I think, unless I'm mistaken, what I think Bill was asking more, I guess in general, it had to do with whether the object of negation appears to a sense consciousness. Remember we were saying that it does.
Yes, yes, that was the first question.
Right.
But then it went back to went backwards to the second question, which was, does the person appear?
because when we're looking at a chariot, I can kind of see that it doesn't, that it appears that it's separate from my own consciousness, that it doesn't depend on my consciousness.
Yes, right.
And that's a good handle I can get.
Yes.
But with the person, everything I think I have is kind of my own mental construct. I'm not really looking down at me.
But feeling the body consciousness.
Just like when you're jabbed with a pin, was something you said? That when, like for example, if you're stuck with
You say, you stuck me.
Right. I mean, that, when I was reading that, that kind of made it very clear for me that, yeah, sense consciousness can apprehend object of negation because, you know, you don't think, oh, someone just stuck me with a pin. You just immediately have that feeling.
Well, it would also mean that the body consciousness can apprehend the person, as well as the inherent existence of the person that appears to the body consciousness. Sound like simple questions, actually. As the fifth Dalai Lama says, Sometimes it appears to be within the context of body, sometimes feelings, sometimes mental consciousness. And he says when you get down to it, in the end, there's some I sense in the center of the chest. Now, is he suggesting that's beyond? That's just to the mental consciousness? Who knows? Yes.
Okay. Going back to the nihilistic, seeing if prasanghikas are nihilistic or not. When you talk about the two truths, we say that we said that like absolute truth and the jerk's truth, or the conventional.
Absolute. You see, I don't use the term absolute because when you look it up in the dictionary, it means independent. And in prasangika, in any of these Gelug version, any of these, in the Gelug interpretations of any school, the so-called ultimate truth is dependent on the object that it qualifies. So there's a mutual dependence even between ultimate truths and the objects they qualify. Therefore, absolute, I don't use the term absolute.
Ultimate?
Yes, ultimate.
Okay.
But we haven't read that section yet, so
But we spoke about
we'll get to it. Yes.
the truth.
But
So,
go ahead.
Okay. So my question is, when we talk about conventional truth, we're talking about things that appear to us as truth, as real. Yes?
As truths, yes.
Yeah,
As if there's a concordance between how they appear and how they exist.
right. But the absolute
But now, even ultimate truths, to us, again, they appear to inherently exist to us, and we think that there's a concordance between that appearance and how they exist. Therefore, it is said that the etymology of concealer truth, that etymology even covers ultimate truths. Anyway,
okay, let's see if I can make my point.
I'll interrupt enough so that you lose your point.
So the ultimate truth of all objects is emptiness.
Yes.
Now, in order for that ultimate truth to, I don't want to use the word exist, to be there,
Mm-hmm.
the conventional truth has to exist. The book has to exist as conventional for it to be an emptiness of a book.
Yes, as I was just saying.
Okay, so
Ultimate truths depend on the objects that they qualify. But the question is, can you perceive an ultimate truth without perceiving the conventional truth or velar truth that it qualifies? Yes. That's a big point.
that was
You
my
see, you're
question.
searching, yes, you're searching to find such and such. You don't find it. It doesn't appear to you anymore. So you're seeing the emptiness of something that's not appearing to you anymore. So in meditative equipoise, all you're perceiving is emptiness. Now, there were two schools of thought that came into Tibet with regard to meditative equipoise. One was called having appearance, and the other was called not having appearance, without appearance. Nangche and Nangme. Nyangka, Nangche, and Nangme. And Tsongkhapa, earlier in his life, was Nangche. He felt that in meditative equipoise, the objects that are qualified by emptiness also appear. And later in his life, he felt that in meditative equipoise on emptiness, all that appears is emptiness. I think probably the reason for this is, you see, when you rise out of the Nangme type of meditative equipoise, objects appear as qualified by emptiness. That's the time when you get the two together. And of course, objects then appear to be very different from how they formerly appeared to you. But it's just my own guess. If in meditative equipoise, the object that was qualified by emptiness appeared along with emptiness, then could you be in a totally non-dualistic state? You see, it's supposedly only at Buddhahood that the false appearance of objects is overcome. So the appearance of objects brings with it an impossibility of being in a totally non-dualistic state. Once we haven't overcome the obstructions to omniscience. So the hinge may have been a change in view on what the obstructions to omniscience are. I don't know, for him. It may be why he changed his view. But there apparently, and you see, is a this fabulous cognition in which all that appears is emptiness. None of the objects that are qualified by emptiness. And all of the emptinesses in all world systems appear, but not with any aspect of difference. There's no sense of difference. Therefore, to say emptiness appears, or that all emptinesses appear, from the point of view of the mind experiencing it, you see, it's all one big whatever. Well, it's not even big, but, I mean, it has to be, this stunning cognition, I would say, is at the root of Indian, I don't know about all religious systems, but most Indian religious systems. This stunning cognition, totally beyond phenomena. And these systems, in some way, are trying to work this into are trying to absorb its impact.
Isn't that so?
It doesn't really make sense to only perceive emptiness.
In meditative equipoise. Now, you rise out of meditative equipoise, which doesn't mean you have to stand up or anything, and then phenomena reappear, and thus, at that point, you understand, even though they're appearing differently, there's still a sense of false appearance to them. They still appear to inherently exist. Thus, you know that they're like illusions then. They appear as like illusions, appearing one way, but existing another way.
But is that real?
And what you're trying, you see, it is said that except for Buddhas, the state in meditative equipoise and subsequent to meditative equipoise alternate. You can't have the two at the same time. But at Buddhahood, you have the two at the same time. And so, I don't know where you're speaking from, but what the Bodhisattva wants is to have both at the same time, because the Bodhisattva wants to help. And the only way to help is to have appearance. Does the object have to appear at the same time as emptiness appears? No. That's almost, you see, the type of qualm that you have leads me to think, oh, this profound state is like prior to the system. Because they're willing to say something like, the object's most profound quality can appear without the object appearing. But from another point of view, that most profound quality of the object is the basis of the object, the she. It's not just a quality. I mean, it's often talked about as the most profound quality, right? But it's also the basis of the object.
If it is dependent on the object, doesn't it make it a conventional truth?
No, it makes it a dependent arising. And one of the meanings, you're right on, one of the meanings of samvrti, as we said, was mutual dependence or relativity of samvrti. Therefore, as Benenchoje says, this etymology of samvrti extends beyond what is defined as samvrti, because ultimate truths are also relative. As Nagarjuna says, there is no phenomenon that is not a dependent arising. You see, an etymology doesn't have to be strict. For instance, lotuses are called lake-born, upja, chuge, chule gyeba. But to be a lotus doesn't have to be born, produced from a lake. Here, the etymology is smaller than the objects indicated by the term upja, because a lotus born from dry ground can also be called upja or chugye, supposedly. So here's a case where the etymology is smaller. Case where the etymology is wider, I should have a common example. Maybe even, traditionally I haven't heard this, but semjin, no, the etymology, they would even work it into the etymology. Buddhas are not semjin, even though they have minds. I will use it as an example. If you just do a very strict etymology, having mind, semtan demba, Buddhas have minds, but they aren't semjin, because the definition is one who has a mind that still has obstructions yet to be removed.
Early on in the semester, we were talking about distinctions between things being one entity and different from each other.
Yes.
And particularly between the conventional and the ultimate.
Yes.
Being different, I think.
Be different within being one entity, and in fact being mutually exclusive. The one can't be the other. And even a dichotomy in that all existent things are included within conventional truths and ultimate truths. Yet, it's not, when we talk about it, different, we say the conventional truth, ultimate truth, right? We've already separated them out as different entities. Just thought does this.
You're looking for the book and you don't find it. You have the emptiness of the book. But if you look for emptiness, you don't find that either. You have the emptiness of emptiness. It's the
non-finding of the non-finding.
The non-finding of the non-finding. And so they call it a non-affirming negative. On that, because of that, or?
No. Non-affirming negatives may have implications. You see, an affirming negative, like the fat slob Devadatta's not eating during the day, suggests that he eats at night, right? But you understand the implication there of eating at night.
That's an affirming negative.
Because the thing that's affirmed is positive, eating at night. Now, can a non-affirming negative have an implication? Yes, as long as it's another non-affirming negative. So, for instance, the non-existence of horns of a rabbit is a non-affirming negative, but that implies the non-existence of the creases of the horns of a rabbit. Right? So they're both non-affirming negatives. That are, the second negative is a non-affirming negative. So the first negative can have that as its implication. So I guess the emptiness of space has as a non-affirming implication the emptiness of the space in the East. Yes, why not? Sometimes when you think, well, there's the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness, then what do you realize when you realize emptiness, say? Well, I don't know, for some reason this isn't, I may have kind of gotten through this problem at some point. You're realizing whatever emptiness it is that you're realizing. I mean, it almost seems to make it all tentative, as if maybe there'll be a finding at some point. No. It said when you cognize emptiness directly, if you had to realize, this is not your question either, if you had to realize emptinesses individually, there'd be no time in which you could realize even all the emptinesses associated with one object. Because there's the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness. You'd have to, and serially, you'd have to keep turning your mind to it. You see, even though they're not different, and you can realize the one based on the realizing the former one, you have to turn your mind to each, and that takes time. No matter how fast you do it, okay? But when you directly cognize emptiness, you're realizing all emptinesses simultaneously. And again, though, I emphasize without any sense of difference. among the emptinesses, or between the subject that realizes them and those emptinesses. Therefore, again, it's as if there's some basic, absolutely fabulous cognition that is trying to be described in words, and so people are talking about the emptiness of this, emptiness of that. Daksang, for instance, says the emptiness of the book is the emptiness of the cup. This Sankhya. And you can see why. Because it's not any different. There's the absence of inherent existence, this just non-affirming negative of this, non-affirming negative of that, are the same. And Aryadeva says if you realize the emptiness of one thing, you realize the emptiness of all. Which in terms of conceptual realization, Gelupas have to say, well, if you realize the emptiness of one, the functioning of that consciousness is such that without any further reflection, you can realize the emptiness of this. But you can see how people would take different tacts.
All right. That actually does answer my question, because... Okay, another question. The stuff on the selflessness of persons in emptiness yoga, page 225, I think.
He just quickly made up this question in order to suggest that he had read page 225, but we'll play along with it.
I'm confused about the difference between the presentation and selflessness. The I is different from mind and body.
Yes.
In meditation on emptiness, which is on page 49, and the presentation of it in relation to the chariot in. All right, on page 232 in emptiness yoga, when describing the subject chariot is not inherently different from its parts, because otherwise they would be different entities. Whatever are different entities and simultaneous, this must be unrelated other factualities, hence like a horse and ox. Chariot would have to not be to be observed separately from its parts. And then I'm confused as to how that's the same reasoning as the I is not a separate entity from the mental and physical aggregates, because if it were, there would be no basis for the designation I. The I would be a non-product
Yeah.
changes.
Now, under analysis, something that's findable under analysis, separate ends up as meaning separate entities. Within the context of, you see, what's the real story? The I and its base of designation are one entity, and they're separate or different within being one entity. Whatever that means, okay? But within the context of ultimate analysis, if the I were separate from its basis of, the I can't be separate from its base of designation, because otherwise it wouldn't have that as its base of designation.
Okay.
It would be as different as a horse and an ox.
Okay.
What is separate?
You see, within the context of ultimate analysis, separate ends up as meaning separate entity. Same ends up as meaning absolutely in every way one.
Okay.
I mean, if it said is not inherently separate, right, you'd understand it.
Right.
The meditation on emptiness one. What I'm saying is because it's within the context of ultimate analysis, separate means inherently separate.
Okay.
I have a question related to this. We said earlier that the object designated and the basis of designation are different.
Yes,
And yet they're one entity.
yes,
So what is it to say that
conventionally.
conventionally that they're one entity and yet nothing which is the basis of designation is the object designated?
Yes. As the Dalai Lama said in lectures on the 6 Rigso True of Nagarjuna, 6 collections of reasoning of Nagarjuna. To say that, say, the I and the space of designation are one entity and different conceptual isolates, or what, this Dohvatade, what could be more false than that? It doesn't mean false as a statement, but this is the way falsities are. You have to say such things. That when you search to find it out, there's nothing to find. Oh. So, the I and the space of designation are dependent arisings. I arises in dependence upon a space of designation. That doesn't mean it's produced by it, right? So within this dependent structure, everything exists. So the view is utterly without a trace, without, as they say, a speck. There's not even a speck of inherent existence for things also to be dependently arisen and to posit ethics and so forth within that context. Now, many persons, Buddhists, can't understand this. And you're understanding why. And thus they want to posit something that is, we start putting bad words on it, a bit more substantial. You might say a bit more sane. That it's established by way of its own character. In the sense, just all that means is you can find something that is it. It isn't a figment of the imagination.
It does make sense though that if you could find something that was it, then, as you're saying, then there couldn't be any dependent rising. Because then that thing that was it couldn't change.
She's advancing.
Well, but then I don't understand what the alternative is. Actually, in some
So, for next time, this has been fun. Well, you're reading on an emptiness yoga, and but I'll be talking about, I'll start Newland, discussion on Newland. And that actually is the way we may do it, is to keep reading on some sort of reasoning while discussing Newland, so that the reasonings will be done when we finish Newland, and we can go back and sort of encapsulate, not encapsulate, whatever, talk about it.